Some players scored goals. Some players won trophies. But Dennis Bergkamp did something far more dangerous. He made defenders question reality itself. Crowds didn't just cheer when Bergkamp touched the ball. They froze. Because with him, football stopped feeling like a sport and started feeling like an illusion. And you know what the scariest part is? Even the defenders standing inches away never understood how he did it until it was too late.
Running onto the ball, Bergkamp, the chip score!
Every football fan watching this knows the feeling I am about to describe, because we have all lived it at some point in our lives. It is the feeling of watching a single moment on a pitch and realizing, in real time, that you are witnessing something that should not be physically possible. The kind of moment that makes grown men go quiet in pubs when the clip comes on the television. Dennis Bergkamp gave the world one of those moments on the 4th of July in 1998. And he gave it to us on the biggest stage that football has to offer, which is exactly why we are still talking about him today. It is a World Cup quarterfinal at the Stade Vélodrome in Marseille, and the stadium is packed with 70,000 bodies in the stands, the heat of a southern French summer pressing down on every single one of them. Argentina are playing the Netherlands, and the winner walks into the semis while the loser flies home in disgrace. The clock ticks over into the 89th minute with the score locked at 1-1, and both teams are exhausted as extra time closes in on them like bad weather rolling off the Mediterranean. Frank de Boer, the Dutch defender, picks up the ball deep inside his own half and looks up. And what he sees is Dennis Bergkamp 45 yards away, already starting his run. De Boer launches a 45-yard diagonal missile into the Argentine sky, and Roberto Ayala, the man marking Bergkamp, has no idea what is about to happen to his career. The first touch from Bergkamp should not be physically possible, because the ball is coming down from a great height at an absurd speed. And yet, he meets it with the outside of his right foot in a way that makes the ball die on his foot the way a snowflake dies on warm glass. The second touch flicks the ball across his own body past Ayala, who has not moved an inch because his brain has not finished processing the first touch yet. The third touch is a volley off the outside of that same right foot from an impossibly tight angle, and it flies past Carlos Roa and tucks into the far corner of the Argentine net. 3 touches, less than 2 seconds, and the entire Argentine defense is reduced to a row of spectators standing inside their own penalty area. I have watched that goal more times than I can reasonably count, and I still cannot tell you which of the 3 touches is the most ridiculous of them all. The Dutch commentator Jack van Gelder lost his actual voice screaming Bergkamp's name into the microphone, and if you have never heard that commentary, do yourself a favor tonight and look it up, because it is the sound of a grown man losing his entire mind in the most beautiful way possible. That goal was not improvisation in the moment, because it was actually 20 years of preparation, cashing in on one defender's worst possible day. To understand where those 3 touches actually came from, we have to rewind all the way to a brick wall behind a house in Amsterdam, because this story starts a long way from any stadium. The Bergkamp family were Catholic, with 4 sons and a father who worked as an electrician and played amateur football on the weekends. Their household in Amsterdam supported Manchester United and took its holidays in England, which is already a strange combination for a Dutch family in the late 60s. Wim Bergkamp named his 4th son after a Scottish striker called Dennis Law, with 1 N, just like the man in Manchester. The Dutch civil registrar refused the paperwork because Dennis, with 1 N, reads as Denise, a girl's name. So Wim added a 2nd N to the form. You must have loved that detail, because the man who would one day define an entire English football club actually needed an English idol and a bureaucratic compromise just to exist on his own birth certificate. The real story begins behind the family house near the A10 motorway, where there is a brick wall, and 8-year-old Dennis would spend hours of his childhood kicking a ball against that wall. Ajax scouts spotted him when he was 11 years old, and he actually turned them down before joining a year later, at 12, on his own terms. Already at 12, this boy was making the football world wait for him to be ready, and by the time he was 17, a man called Johan Cruyff had been watching him very closely indeed. Cruyff treated him like a colleague rather than a prospect. And when Bergkamp's first professional contract was being drawn up, Cruyff insisted that it include back pay for every senior match Bergkamp had played the year before he had signed it. What followed at Ajax was 6 remarkable years, where he won the Cup Winners' Cup as a teenager, won the UEFA Cup in 1992 while missing the final itself with the flu, finished as top scorer of the Eredivisie 3 years running, and was named Dutch Footballer of the Year twice in a row. He scored 122 goals in 239 matches before Inter Milan came calling in 1993 with £7.1 million and a promise to build the entire team around him. In 2 full seasons at Inter, he scored just 11 Serie A goals, and one Italian publication renamed its Donkey of the Week column after him during his 2nd season. He went to Italy to be worshipped as a god, and he came back as a craftsman because Inter Milan did not waste his career. They sanded all the romance off it and left the technique exposed underneath. He did win the UEFA Cup with Inter in 1994, finishing the tournament as joint top scorer with 8 goals. But something else had cracked open inside him that summer in America, and it had absolutely nothing to do with football. The 1994 World Cup was hosted in the United States, and 2 separate incidents happened on Dutch team flights that summer that Dennis Bergkamp never actually recovered from. The first was a moment when one of the engines on the team plane briefly stalled mid-air, and there was panic in the cabin. Then complete silence. Then a long, quiet flight home that nobody really spoke about afterwards. The second incident involved a journalist on a different team flight who made a joke about having a bomb in his luggage, and the flight was delayed, and the journalist was reportedly arrested, somewhere in the back of Dennis Bergkamp's nervous system. A decision quietly locked into place. He never flew again after that summer. Not for a holiday, not for a match, and not for the rest of his football career. Arsenal's vice chairman, David Dine, only found out about the no-fly clause from Bergkamp's agent in a casual conversation, mentioned like a small administrative footnote weeks after the contract had already been signed. The fear of flying did not shrink his career at all, because it built the entire cult around it instead. He drove 850 miles to Florence for one Champions League away match, took ferries across the English Channel for European fixtures, and missed entire games in Kiev and Donetsk because there was simply no realistic ground route to either city. If you have ever felt like the world was telling you to do something and your body refused to cooperate, you understand exactly what Bergkamp was carrying through every airport announcement and every team coach for the rest of his career. Then, a Frenchman walked into Highbury, who was about to look at him and finally see him properly. Arsène Wenger arrived at Arsenal in October 1996, and Bergkamp had spent his first season in London going 7 full matches without a single goal, with the British tabloid press running a daily goal clock and one paper actually printing a photo of a goal to remind him what one looked like. Wenger did not sign a striker at all. He signed a brain with feet attached and quietly built an entire football empire around what that brain could see in less than half a second. In 1998, Bergkamp won both the PFA Player of the Year and the Football Writers' Footballer of the Year awards in the same season. And he scored a hat-trick at Leicester in August 1997 that was so beautiful that all 3 goals finished first, second, and third in the Match of the Day Goal of the Month vote, which has never happened to any other footballer before or since. He spent the next 8 years making Thierry Henry look immortal, making the invincible season inevitable, and quietly setting up 3 Premier League titles and 4 FA Cups for Arsenal. Then he painted his second masterpiece on a wet afternoon at Newcastle in March 2002, when Robert Pires chipped a pass to him that went behind him instead of to his feet. With Nikos Tabizas locked onto his back, Bergkamp flicked the ball with his left foot around one side of the defender, spun his own body around the other side, met the ball again on the opposite side of Tabizas, as if geometry itself had been waiting for him to invent a shortcut, and calmly slotted it past Shay Given. It was later voted the greatest solo goal in the entire history of the Premier League, and if you grew up watching football in that era, you remember exactly where you were the first time you saw it. Bergkamp retired in 2006, and his testimonial match was the first game ever played at the new Emirates Stadium, where Arsenal beat Ajax 2-1, with Cruyff, Henry, Wright, and Vieira all in attendance, and his own 3 daughters serving as match mascots. In 2014, Arsenal unveiled a bronze statue of him outside the Emirates that captured him mid-air, controlling a ball with 1 foot. And the detail nobody mentions enough is that they did not sculpt him scoring, because they sculpted him receiving the ball. That is where the genius actually happened. And that is the kind of monument you build to a man you already understand will never be replaced. He finished with 79 caps for the Netherlands, 37 international goals, 3 Premier League titles, 4 FA Cups, an unbeaten invincible season, and a place in the FIFA 100 Greatest Living Players named by Pelé himself. He spent his entire career proving that thought was faster than sprint speed. And nobody who has come after him has been able to forge that signature. That is Dennis Bergkamp, the man who refused every obvious path and turned 3 touches into an entire religion. Tell me in the comments which of his goals you think deserves to be called the greatest of all time.